Welcome back to a new week on Out of the Bubble podcast. How are we all doing? I'm sat at home and it's freezing, freezing cold, but it's glorious blue sky out there. And what a difference some blue sky makes. So I hope that you are all keeping well. So today's a really important conversation. Today we are talking about money. In particular, how good are you at planning for the future and knowing what's ahead of you when it comes down to your finances? For some reason, talking about money, particularly for women, still seems like it's a taboo subject. So I'm delighted to be joined by Sarah Siddons. Sarah is the founder of Siddons Co Financial Planning. She started a completely new business and career back in 2008, had a massive career shift, and she now helps and empowers women to take back control because knowledge is power when it comes to going through finances and financial planning, particularly when you throw divorce into the mix. I know all too well I got divorced at 40, and when I got to that point I was basically financially invisible because I'd taken a back seat and not taken responsibility of my own future planning. And I wish I'd had somebody like Sarah in my corner back then, but knowledge is power and it's a really, really important conversation. So grab a coffee and enjoy. So good morning, Sarah. How are you today?
I'm very well, thank you. Yes, I'm good.
I'm really looking forward to this conversation because I think it's a conversation that lots of women avoid far too often. And I know that it's something that you're really passionate about. Before we get started, finding out more about the work that you do and why you are so passionate about it, the first guest I ask all my the same questions to is if you could describe yourself in 3 words, what would they be and why?
Okay, well, I put a bit of thought to this
Oh,
because,
good.
yeah. It's not often you get asked that question. I guess I'd say resilient, and I hope that further down the conversation you'll kind of grasp why because of the various things that have happened over the years. Um, Determined. I think when you set off in life down a different path and you don't quite know where that's going to lead you, you've got to be pretty determined to make it work. And I'd like to think empathetic. I don't really see how you could end up in a role where you're advising people if you don't have that, natural empathy and that enjoyment of talking to people and understanding people. So I think they're my 3 words.
I love those, and knowing your story as I do, and I can't wait to get more into that later. I think they're perfect words. Really good. Thank you for sharing. So, before we get into the nitty gritty of financial planning, that was not your kind of natural habitat, was it? You did have a real career pivot, really. Was it 2008 when this all happened?
Yes, yeah. So I started out, I think like a lot of people, I started out after I did a politics degree at university, and then I started out just falling into a role really because I'd had some work experience. And I went to work in London immediately after university in advertising and marketing. Worked in London agency, then I worked client side for a while, and then I moved up to Leeds for personal reasons and worked agency side here as well. And I just fell out of love with the industry and kind of realised that, you know, in my early 30s, that if I was going to sort of settle down and have a family, really that environment wasn't conducive to having a sort of more relaxed home life because the hours were very long and it was very demanding. And you can't really have two people, I think, in a household where you've both got unsociable working hours. So something had to give.
Oh, and what drew you to the financial planning side of things? Had you always had an interest in that? I mean, you are talking to somebody here that took 3 years to get their O-level maths, by the way. So
Yeah, yeah,
it's
yeah.
not a natural, for me personally, it wouldn't
No,
be a natural choice.
no. Well, I think it's a bit of a misnomer that you have to be good at maths to do this job.
Yeah.
Obviously, you have to be, reasonably good in the sense of being able to sort of work with maths with percentages and tax and that kind of thing. But really, what drew me to it was that my father's very commercial, had always had commercial roles in his working life, and he brought myself and my sister up to always plan financially and to put money to one side and think about the future. And so I'd always taken advice myself. So from moving up to Leeds when I was 25, I had always had some form of financial advisor in my life. And when I got to sort of my, I think it was about 32 or 3, when I started to think, do you know what, I need to find something different to do. And I really, really wanted to work for myself. I wanted to create something on my own, that I could basically test myself to see whether I had the ability to sort of run a business and create something and be successful, rather than I was working for somebody else. And I think I was 33 when I asked my own financial advisor, who just happened, he happened to be a financial advisor with St James's Place. And I just said, I think I'd be quite good at your job. And he said to me, so do I. So basically, he passed my CV into the organisation. And it was a serendipitous moment, really, where they just so happened to be testing the waters around creating their own academy, where they would take people who had commercial experience but didn't necessarily have the financial qualifications to be a financial advisor, and they basically were happy to sort of send us back to school, get us through our exams, and then bring us into their advice partnerships, the St James's Place partnership. So I went through all of the interviews with them, and they offered me a place on the first academy. And then I found out I was pregnant with my first child.
Timing.
So I know. So I had to give back words initially, but they kept in touch with me. And then I got a phone call again when my son Archie was about 4 months old, saying to me, look, we really, really want you to join us. Please, will you consider coming down to London in April? At which point Archie was nearly 6 months old, and do the course with us, which would take me through to September. And it was a big ask for me, because he was really little and he was only just starting to have some tasty days at nursery. But I thought, do you know what? If I do this, if I focus on this for the next 6 months, I can change all of our lives, because I can be that more flexible mum who, can define my own working pattern, actually. So I went for it. And it was tough. I was up and down to London most weeks. I sat an exam every 2 weeks for 3 months, I think it was.
Wow.
So there's a lot of studying, and equally I was at home juggling with Archie, because I was only in London 1 or 2 days a week. And then in August I had to go down for the full month, Monday to Friday. So I literally would put him to bed on a Sunday night and not see him again till Saturday morning. But I did it. I
Yeah.
did it, and I came out the other end of it. And when I remember sitting there thinking, crikey, now all I've got to do is build a practice. No clients, no money, no clients.
It's really what I mean. I think people will be listening to this thinking, "Gosh, she's brave." But you strike me as someone that's always had a lot of self-belief in yourself. Were there wobbles along the way, or did you just know? Did something just feel instinctively right for you?
I think, because actually I have a lot more self-belief now than I did back then. And I think one of the things that pushed me out of my old career was that I did lack a bit of self-belief, actually. When we used to pitch for new business, I'd often be the person that might step back and let a colleague take charge, because I was afraid of failing.
Hmm.
And I think, looking back, almost I was afraid of failing for others. When it was me on my own, I only had myself to blame, and I only had myself to be accountable to.
Yeah.
So it almost became a bit easier to take the risks. And I'm not a natural risk taker. But I think I don't know why. I still can't explain why. I just had that self belief that I can do this.
Hmm.
And it was really, really stressful the first year or two, trying to build a client base from nowhere, just from literally speaking to your network, your acquaintances, friends. But I just kept going, kept going. I mean, I had the most horrific eczema for about 6 months on and off
Oh,
with the stress.
yeah.
But at 12 months in, it got better. 2 years in, it got even better. And people have always said to me that when you create a business from scratch, it takes 3 years really for that business to find its feet properly, and you feel as though you're on a roll.
Yeah.
And I'd now, looking back, really, really agree with that.
And you did, it strikes me from the outside that it's a very male orientated industry. Is that still the case? Or how were you kind of received by the industry as a newbie?
Yeah, I think when I first joined the Leeds partnership, I'd suggest there was literally a handful of female partners. Interestingly, though, those that stayed in the partnership tend to be really successful.
Hmm.
And I think because women have usually that natural empathy, interested in others, want to talk and to people and understand them, that works really, really well in this industry because I was just saying to someone yesterday, actually, you move when you work in the industry I did before, it's a commercial relationship. So what you're doing is you're building rapport with somebody, but there's always the business objectives between you.
Yeah.
Whereas what I do is completely personal. So whilst you still obviously have to have a professional relationship with somebody because you're their trusted advisor, actually money sits at the heart of everybody's well-being really in life. And I think, being trusted to look after somebody's finances is a very personal thing
Yeah.
on the part of the client. So yeah, I think being a female in this industry can be of great benefit. And actually, I was a bit of a tomboy growing up. I love male company. I have fantastic colleagues within
Hmm.
SJP, and they've been really, really supportive of me, actually. I
Good.
mean, I remember wobbling into my diploma exams pregnant with my second child. So basically, 3 years into building the practice, I had my daughter, Olivia. And at that time, we were going through a thing called RDR. So that was a change in the industry, which meant that every advisor to stay working in the industry had to be at least diploma qualified. So we were all sent back to school, if you like. And in 2010 and 11, we were all in classrooms getting our diploma exams, which, now with hindsight for me, I think I took 6 the first time, 5 the second set with the diploma. So it was another tough call really doing that. But yeah, they were great with me and they always have been super
Hmm.
supportive. But you're right, it is a male dominated industry. And I still find that quite fascinating when you consider, how it's so well suited actually to a working a mother in particular, this job.
Do you think it's back to that same old kind of taboo around the conversation of money, isn't it? Women don't seem as comfortable to talk about money and finances as men, and I still can't work out why. But I know conversation. I don't have conversations with my friends, for instance, about money and planning, and it's just not something we ever talk about. And I can hear my husband on the phone quite often talking about different things that are going on in the financial world. Why is it, do you think, that there is still this taboo around talking about women, money for women?
Um, I think that I think that a lot of the women I know, you're right, they don't really talk about, they don't focus on the financial side of their lives. I'm not sure if a little bit it's almost seen as being a little bit self-centered, that
Yeah,
actually what a lot of women tend to do is they focus on everyone else around them. They focus on the family unit. And it isn't actually so much these days that it's because women don't get involved in the family finances, because I find there's as many people walk through this door as couples where the woman is the person that manages the household finances, as
yeah,
it is the man now.
yeah,
Um, I think that what women don't do is they don't plan ahead for themselves. They don't sit down in that more strategic way that, to be fair, a lot of men don't either. That's why they come in and need
yeah.
financial advice,
That's why they
frankly.
need you.
Yeah, yeah. But I think they're more likely to do that, and they perhaps think more in those black and white terms. And women, I think, if anything, they're more likely to do things like put money away for the children, or think about, a holiday fund or
Yeah,
things like that, as opposed to, have I got a pension? Do I know what would happen if something happened to my spouse?
yeah,
Do I know what would happen if something happened to my marriage or my relationship? I just think they don't think in those terms. And I don't know why. Maybe it's just a cultural thing, the way we're brought up. I don't know.
Yeah, it's interesting. But I know that one of your specialities and something you're really passionate about is helping women, particularly going through divorces. Because, and it's something I'd not thought about. I've been through a divorce and I wish I'd met you 12 years ago because your immediate thought is, right, I need a lawyer, I need a solicitor, I need to go and sort that out. And actually, what I really would have been better doing is seeing somebody like yourself alongside a lawyer because it's the financial side that's the most important of planning ahead. So you specialize in helping women through that, but what caused your passion for that particular area?
Well, I knew for a while that my marriage wasn't going to work long term. So I married before I had my children, and stayed in that marriage for a long time. I think it was about 14 years in the end. And I knew a couple of years beforehand that I was probably going to have to, be brave and do something about it. And I think, like a lot of women, you put everyone first. You don't want to upset the children's lives. You don't want to break up the family unit. You don't want to fail.
Hmm.
I definitely saw it as a personal failure,
Yeah.
which, looking back now, absolutely it wasn't a failure. I did everything in my power to make that marriage work. And it just didn't.
Mm.
So, what I did, and you could argue it's because of my job, or maybe it's just because that's how my brain's wired, and I do just naturally have that more commercial view of the world. But I sat down with a friend who's also a family, a divorce lawyer, and I said to her, look, I don't think this marriage is going to last. I need to know what I need to know, because I do not want this to be a financial disaster for me.
Mm.
And I was desperate at the time to keep the status quo for the children. I really, really wanted to, if I could afford to do it, buy him out of the family home.
Mm.
I'd found the perfect home. I know everyone says it's just bricks and mortar, but to me it wasn't. It was kind of one of my main goals of starting the business and being financially successful myself, was to put those walls around me that almost in some ways reminded me of my own childhood,
Yeah.
the family home I grew up in as a child. So that was really important to me. Anyway, sitting down with her, she sort of said to me, look, there's some really easy things to think about here. Theoretically, the starting point for any divorce is 50-50. The fact that you happen to have more than him means that you're probably going to be the one that has to start compromising and moving things around. So you need liquidity in your finances.
Mm.
And what I've been doing, I've been plowing money into paying down the mortgage on the house. I've been putting money into my pension. And all those things are illiquid because your pension you can't access till you're 55 at the moment. Your house, obviously, you can't get the money out of it unless you can borrow it, or you can sell the property. And I
Yeah.
didn't want to do either, really. So I stopped doing some of those things a while before I called time on the marriage, just knowing that the likelihood was that it wasn't going to succeed. And so when I did finally, I was one of those people that in lockdown just thought enough is enough.
Mm.
So I had a lockdown divorce, and I think I kind of tackled it as I would my job.
Yeah.
And I literally I set out my stall. This is what I want to achieve, and 6 months later we were divorced
Yeah.
with a financial consent order in place. But I think I've described it when I was asked on another forum that's specifically about divorce. I was asked to sort of to create almost like an analogy of how I felt at that time. And I said it was like I set the train out of the station. So I ended the marriage and I spoke to a divorce lawyer. Now, I've been on the back of all of that with clients, but obviously I'd never started that process myself.
Mm.
So whilst I knew the sort of nuts and bolts of it, I think experiencing it personally is a completely different thing.
Yeah.
So I set the train out the station. I contacted the lawyer and said, right, I want to start divorce proceedings. What do I do? And then what I found was over a number of weeks, it was like I was getting further and further through the carriages to the back of the train, and everyone else was driving this blooming train, and I had no control whatsoever. I thought, hang on a minute, this has got to stop, because all I could see ahead of me was, you know, us not making decisions, it getting really fractious,
Mm.
spending lots of money on legal fees. And I just thought, this isn't necessary. I need to wrestle some control back here. And I suppose one of the things that surprised me, and I don't mean it to be critical of my colleagues in the law,
Yeah.
but one of the things that surprised me was how little knowledge there was around the need for financial planning around a divorce. Because
Yeah.
it's all very well saying, well, you're entitled to this, that, and the other, but what does that mean?
Yeah. Nobody sat me down and kind of went through that process and said, right, this is what you need to plan for the future. This is the minimum that you need to get by, and this is
Yeah,
how we could do it. Nobody sat me down and did that. And I, looking
yeah,
back now, I'm
yeah,
like, why did I not? But I wasn't in the right frame of mind to do that. And it was kind of, you're bombarded by all this information if you don't know what you're doing.
yeah. Yeah. So I mean, almost it feels a bit like, well, for me, what happened was, I actually sort of called a halt on the legal process, and went down a slightly different avenue, and went via mediation.
Hmm.
And a mediator sat down with us, and we both revealed our financial positions, and then she basically acted as a negotiator between the two of us.
Hmm.
And over 2 or 3 sessions, we thrashed out what we were both prepared to agree to as a financial settlement between us. And then that went to the lawyer, my lawyer, to draft as a consent order, and then his lawyer looked over it, and once we'd both agreed it, off it went to court, and that was that.
Yeah.
Um, but I had already done my own planning in the background. And if I meet someone now who is in the first stages of divorcing, and or are thinking of divorcing, the kind of process I go through with them is we get them to fill in a income and expenditure form, so they understand, what income they're used to having in their household,
Hmm.
what they're used to spending and what they spend it on. And then we look at what asset base they've got, what asset base their soon to be ex spouse has got. And then we do a cash flow report for them. So we do a cash flow report that shows them, with what they say they need to spend, how much money they're going to need for the rest of their life.
Yeah.
Because what that also does is it predicts forward to when they retire. Because of course, if you're, particularly for women who are more, I would suggest, more vulnerable, where they're not working at the same level anymore as their partner,
Yeah.
so they're reliant on a partner's income. um, it's not always easy or possible to get back to the place you might have been in when you both met.
Yeah.
And I meet a lot of women where they started out in a very similar level in business or whatever profession they were in with their partner, but because one of them had to sort of compromise to make for a happy family life, often that's the woman, not always these days, but
Hmm.
often that's the woman. And there they are, 20 years down the track or 15 years down the track, and whether they've ended the marriage for their own reasons or whether a partner's just launched it on them that they're not happy and they're off, and all of a sudden there's this massive deficit in the future finances.
Yeah.
So if you're going to argue about what you need constructively with lawyers or a mediator or a judge, you've got to show them evidence, I think, of why you need that money, not just because you want it, but
Yeah.
because you need it. And now our cash flow modelling that we do now for clients, that gives them the evidence. Um, and I've even had one divorce where a barrister used it in court to show why a client needed a greater share of her ex-husband's pension, because she had so little pension of her own
Hmm.
that if he didn't get that extra share for her, she would have been poor in retirement,
Yeah.
literally, you know, on the breadline.
Yeah.
Um,
There might be women listening to this that are in the kind of the same position, but that have had, like you've just said about, they've had divorce thrust on them. So they weren't prepared for this. So they hadn't done the pre-planning. They hadn't been able to take any action beforehand. How do they then navigate that? Because that's, you know, that it was my choice to end my marriage. But even when I decided to do that, I was financially invisible because he had been the major breadwinner. He was extremely wealthy. I had naively kind of taken a backseat from the finances, probably because maths scares the hell out of me, so I chose to ignore it, and I hold my hand up to that, and that's my responsibility. But when it came to the crunch, I was financially invisible, and it was like starting all over again. So what advice do you give to women that are in that sudden situation of, you know, shit, what do I do now? How can I make
Yeah,
this work for me?
yeah. Well, I'd say, because I had that exact example in November, when a lady contacted me through an existing client, and we basically, I mean, she was in pieces because she trusted in this relationship. She'd allowed her husband to, like you say, you know, take over being the manager of their money, make plans for them both for the future. You know, she was involved in his business, but only by name in the end of it,
Mm.
because they had 3 children, or they got 3 children. And yeah, you could tell in her voice she was just utterly distraught, but also scared.
Mm.
So the first thing I did was I got her to fill in an expenditure form, and then we did a voyant report for her, because chatting to her, you know, I can garner enough information about someone's situation to sort of see what level of, you know, income and assets they've got. So we did the cash flow report and we sent that to her. And I mean, it, you know, it didn't make for good reading.
Mm.
It showed a lot of red, put it this way, on her chart, i.e., that she's going to run out of money.
Yeah.
But I think, just even if it's bad news, having the information, having some substantiation for what you think you already know you need, it empowers you a bit more.
Yeah.
So even in that situation where, you know, she can't do anything about the fact that he's left her, she can't do anything about the fact that they're going to be divorcing, but she can now have informed conversations with whoever she chooses to represent her, and they in turn can have informed conversations with, you know, whoever he chooses to represent him. And I think that's where I do not still understand why any divorce lawyer would not embrace the idea of working with a financial planner,
Mm.
because it must make their job easier too.
Yeah, it seems like the perfect marriage for the
Mm-hmm.
two to work together on this, and I can imagine would save a lot of time and money.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And I think also, just, it's the same whenever with money. If you've got knowledge, you've got power.
Yes, yeah, and that's really empowering if you're in a vulnerable position, isn't it?
Yes,
Which as a
yeah,
woman, when you go through this, or a man, you are when you go through big changes.
yeah,
And you know, there's lots of women that I talk to in midlife that are going through divorce. It seems to be a kind of a stage where people reassess life, and
yeah.
some people, like myself, almost have to start again financially. It's never too late, is it, to make plans for the future at whatever your age? Obviously, if you've not had a pension in your 20s and 30s, you can still do it later in life, can't you?
Yeah, you can. And I mean, you know, it's always in my job, I have to be honest with people and say, you know, it's harder because,
Yeah.
you know, one of the most powerful forces in the universe is compound, you know, compound interest, compound growth. So the sooner you start doing these things, the better. And I would say to anyone who's kind of watching this or listening to this, and particularly women with daughters of their own, just encourage them from a very early age to consider always putting away a proportion of their money or their income, because the sooner you start, the better the outcome will be.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's never too late. And let's face it, um, if you just bury your head in the sand, you're going to just make a bad problem even worse.
Yeah.
Doing even something about it is better than nothing. And you know what we do is, we're not there to judge. We're not there to say to somebody, "Oh, if only you'd done this," you know. And
Yeah.
you know, that's not part of the conversation, because when somebody comes to see us, what's done is done.
Yeah.
All we can do is help them move forward. Um, And so when I look at somebody's situation, you know, sometimes you do have to have difficult conversations. Say, well, you might have to downsize, or you know, you might have to reduce your lifestyle or change your lifestyle in retirement. But even simple things like getting people to do a state pension forecast, which most people have never done.
Yeah.
You know, if I meet people in their late 40s or in their 50s and I get them to do a state pension forecast, they at least know whether they're on track to get a full state pension then. And that's not a small amount of money anymore. I mean, I think after the increases that will go on to state pension um, by the end of this tax year or the start of the new tax year, it's over £10,000 a year.
Yeah.
So if you've got that as a potential backstop, that could be what actually pays the bills in retirement.
Yeah.
And anything else that you do, you know, creates the lifestyle. So, you know, some action is better than the proverbial head in the bucket of sand approach.
Yeah, and what's clear from our conversation is knowledge is power. Knowledge is empowering, and it's where, you know, changes can happen from that point on, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, yeah.
And you know what else I love about you? I was reading some stuff about you, and I love the fact that you really do practice what you preach when it comes to empowering women, because you also sponsor a women's football team as well. I just wanted to get that in because I love that you do that.
Yeah. Well,
It's brilliant.
It's becoming so popular, isn't it? You know, I've
Yeah.
got lots of friends whose little girls are having a great time now playing football. I've got a friend whose little girl's under contract with York. So yeah, you know,
Brilliant.
it's yeah, whatever I can do to make. I just want, like, my little girl's now nearly 11. She's 11, nearly leaving junior school rather, and anything I can do to make her understand that she can do whatever she wants in this life. You know, I was really lucky. I'm one of two girls, got a younger sister, and my father said he always wanted daughters. And he brought us up not to believe that we were any different or that we could achieve any less just because we happened to be born female.
Yeah.
And I just want my daughter to sort of grow up thinking, well, my mum did it, so I can do it.
Yeah.
And not to be ever held back just because she happened to be born a girl.
I love that. It's been an absolute pleasure talking to you, Sarah. Thank you so much. How can people come and find you? Because I'm sure there'll be people listening here that are thinking, gosh, I'm in this position. I need to take some action. How can people come and find you?
Yeah, well, the best thing to do probably is to look up my business, which is Siddons Co Financial Planning. I don't know, some people do know, some people don't, but Sarah Siddons was also a famous actress in the 1700s. So you can get some quite interesting results when you put Sarah Siddons into Google. But I'm there. My email address, my number. I'm on LinkedIn. I'm on Facebook as Siddons Co Financial Planning. So
Brilliant. I'll
we've
share all
got a
those links on the
website.
show notes as well,
Yeah,
so
yeah.
people
But
can
yeah,
come and
that's
find
the
you.
best way to find me.
Amazing. Well, thank you so much. It's been really insightful, and I'm sure there'll be people that can totally relate to what they're going through right now, and it's made them have some light bulb moments. So thank you.
Yeah.
My last question that I ask all my guests: if you were to pay yourself one compliment, what would it be?
Well, I think that I'm going to get a bit emotional now. I think that the 35-year-old Sarah would actually be really proud of what the about to turn 50-year-old Sarah has achieved for herself.
Yes. Yeah,
Yeah.
I love that. And you're not the first person to get emotional. Isn't it funny how when we stop and think about praising
Yeah.
ourselves, it seems unnatural for women to do, and it brings up all sorts of emotions. So thank you
Yeah,
for
no, it
sharing
does.
that.
You're right. You're right.
And so before we go, turning 50, how does that feel?
Oh, well, I'm not sure really. Sorry, I've just realised the sun's in my eyes here. Let me turn around a bit. Oh
It's a
no, I've probably
gorgeous
gone
sunny
dark
day.
now. How does it feel? I still feel about 25 inside.
Yeah.
I'm not ready. I'm not ready to be 50, but hey ho, you
Have you
got to
got
embrace
exciting
it.
plans? Have you got some things planned in the diary?
Yes, yeah. So I've got Vietnamese chef coming to cook for us at the weekend.
Oh,
And
amazing.
I'm off with my partner. So new partner, very happy, and we're off to the Lake District for a couple of days. for a bit of R&R and
Lovely.
big party with friends on Friday night. So I'm definitely celebrating it.
Brilliant. Make the most of it. Have a fabulous year, and thank you so much for joining me today. It's been a
Thank you.
pleasure.
Thanks, Rachel.
Thanks, Sarah. So many takeaway messages in that podcast this week and lots to think about. Right from the start, I loved Sarah's story of transitioning and completely having that U-turn in career and her self-belief. And I think the word courage springs to mind because it takes a lot of guts. It takes courage to have that self-belief, follow your gut instinct that you know that a different career path is going to suit you. Her actual motto is she believed she could, so she did. And I love that. And I think that it's never too late to listen to your gut instinct and make changes, whatever direction that might lead you into, because Sarah has, shown us how she completely turned her career around and is thriving now and doing and is where she should be. She's helping lots of other women and helping them rise up too. Another point I thought was really interesting is the fact that it's never too late to take control. And no matter how bad you think your financial position might be, knowledge is power, and avoiding it and sticking your head in the sand is not going to work. You can get to a point where you know exactly where you stand and take action. And I think that's the word, isn't it? Knowledge and action to empower women to make sure that we are on the right track and we can plan for our future. I also think the point about making sure we pass it down the generation. I've got two older daughters, and it's certainly conversations that I have with them regularly about making sure that they plan from a young age for their future so that we don't have to rely on anybody else, and that we know we're in control of our destiny and our future when it comes to finances and money. Let's lift this taboo and make sure that we are talking about it in a much more positive, actionable way, because it's a really important subject. So if that is you and you are in the middle of going through a divorce in particular, I know from personal experience how rocky that can be, and you haven't already seen a financial planner, then perhaps as well as going to see a lawyer, perhaps you should go and do that too, because I think the two work really well together. And like Sarah says, I don't understand why it's not actually just a given that that's what we're offered both, really, because we need to have that conversation with a financial planner to make sure that we know where we are in the future, as well as getting all the legal stuff sorted. So lots to think about. I'll be back in a fortnight, but in the meantime, keep being fabulous.